Welcome all of you to my channel. Today we are going to talk about a drama, thriller movie, An Affair released in the year 2018. And I hope that you will definitely like the story of this movie. This story begins with a school gym teacher named Julia. It is Julia's first day at school and she introduces herself to all the students. She also asks the students about them. Meanwhile, Julia asks one of her students named Marco about him. Then Marco jokingly tells that his is very big. After listening to Marco, the whole class started laughing at him. But Julia becomes very uncomfortable with this. Next, Julia has dinner with her two daughters and her husband Jake. And these two daughters were actually Jake's first wives. And now Julia is Jake's second wife. That night Julia tries to have a quality time with her husband Jake. But then Jake was very busy with his work, so he asked Julia to sleep. And this wasn't the first time Jake told Julia to go to sleep. Actually, Jake is a very big lawyer, due to which he was so busy in his work that he was not able to give time to Julia. And because of this, Julia felt incomplete. The next morning, Julia goes for a jog before school. Then he feels that someone is following him. And when she returns home from jogging, then she sees that someone has kept flowers for her. And Julia finds this quite strange. Further, Marco gives Julia a compliment when she goes to school. And he praises her that she is looking very beautiful today. And after this conversation, Julia started noticing Marco, and every time she started thinking only about him. When Marco fights with a student, when she gives Marco the first step after he gets hurt, then there's a nice moment between the two of them, but then a student comes there and they get separated. Later, after school is over, another teacher tries to flirt with Julia, but Julia ignores him. And when Julia comes to her home, there is another bouquet of flowers kept there. But this time that bouquet was received by Jake, and because of this Jake started suspecting Julia. Because why would anyone leave a bouquet outside his house without any reason? Julia further finds out that Marco is the one who has been sending her the bouquets. And when Julia calls Marco's parents because of his fighting, then she learns that Marco's mother is her old friend Rachel. After some time Julia tries to talk to Marco's parents. Marco then tries to harass Julia. After which, when Marco comes to Julia while she is going home at night, then Julia cannot control herself, and both of them bang with each other. Then after all this, Julia becomes very obsessed with Marco. Julia keeps thinking about Marco all the time. Even when Jake touches her, Julia sees Marco in Jake. Julia becomes so obsessed with Marco that she begins stalking him at school. But as soon as the holidays start, similarly, Marco starts ignoring Julia. And he keeps making excuses for not meeting her. Meanwhile, Julia sees on social media that Marco is not busy anywhere. Rather, he is having fun with a new girl. Julia became very disappointed with this, and she cannot control herself for long. Taking advantage of the fact that Marco's mother is her friend, Julia goes to Marco's house. And while everyone was talking, she makes an excuse of going to the bathroom and goes to meet Marco. When she looks around, Marco is taking a bath there. Marco does not say anything to Julia, and both of them enjoy that moment by bang. But the next day Marco starts ignoring Julia again. Julia constantly sends messages to Marco and always waits for his reply. Seeing Julia on her mobile phone all the time, Jake starts suspecting that she is definitely having an affair with someone. Then school starts in a few days, and Julia hopes to meet Marco at school. But nothing like this happens. Marco doesn't come to school. Marco's girlfriend tells him that he is sick, so he will not come to school for a few days. Now Julia is desperate to meet Marco, and when Jake takes Julia to his office party, then Julia would only think about the moments spent between her and Marco. And upset by this, Julia leaves the place without saying anything to Jake. She goes straight to Rachel. Julia tells Rachel that she has come to visit Marco because he is sick. But Rachel tells you that you have misunderstood. Marco is absolutely fine and has gone to practice his sports. While talking to Rachel, Julia manages to find out the address of Marco's sports club, and she goes to that address to meet Marco. Marco tells Julia that he no longer wants anything to do with her, because now he has a girlfriend and she is very beautiful. Anyway, there is a lot of age difference between us, so whatever happened, it would be better to end it. Julia gets very angry after hearing Marco's words, but she doesn't say anything to him and lets him go from there. But when Julia sees Marco and his girlfriend together at school, so out of jealousy, she secretly uploads some personal photos of Marco's girlfriend from his mobile phone on Facebook, so that both of them break up. Julia doesn't stop there. When Marco's girlfriend is being defamed, Julia goes to his house and gives him false consolation. and instigates her against Marco. But even after all that Julia does, there is no benefit. Marco's girlfriend doesn't let Marco go, so Julia goes to meet Rachel, and she instigates him against Marco's girlfriend, saying that she is not a good girl. When this doesn't work, Julia starts working out to look young and hot like Marco's girlfriend. But when this too doesn't help, then in the end she gives up on everything and plays a dirty trick. Julia meets Marco, and she tells him that he has made her pregnant, and is too late now for abortion. After listening to Julia, Marco gets very angry at himself. He gets angry that what did he do just for a few moments of fun. Marco asks Julia if she can't tell everyone that the baby is Jake's. Then Julia says no, because Jake can never become a father. Hearing this, Marco becomes even more nervous. Then Julia tells him not to worry. She will take care of everything. Instead, he should just reply to her text messages. And whenever Julia calls him to meet, he listens to her every time. After saying this, Julia emotionally blackmails Marco and forcibly has a bang-bang with him in the car itself. And Marco just sits there silently. Then after the work is over, Julia tells Marco to come whenever she needs him. Having no other option, Marco agrees with Julia. Julia thinks her work is done now, and Marco will now be under his control. But while Julia was shopping, the same teacher was flirting with her. He comes to Julia and asks him if he has heard that news, that there is a teacher in their school who is having an affair with a student. So Julia says that no, she does not know anything, and she immediately comes out of the mall. She starts calling Marco, but Marco doesn't pick up the phone. And when Julia leaves to go home from school the next day, then she sees that someone has written some obscene words on her car. Also the next day when Julia comes home from jogging, then she realizes that Jake knows everything about her. And at the same time Rachel also arrives there, and she tells Julia why she did all this. She also asks whether she is really pregnant, so Julia says no. Rachel then tells Julia that if she ever goes near her child again, she will kill her. Now, feeling embarrassed, Julia runs away from her home and spends the whole day in a hotel. When she comes home the next day, Jake does not let her enter the house. He gives him all his stuff from the garage itself. Julia is also expelled from school. Now, before she can leave, Marco comes to her, and he tells her that he didn't know things would get so bad. Next, Julia sits alone on a bench thinking about something, and the story of this movie ends with this scene. If you liked this video, then do subscribe to the channel, so that you do not miss the story of such new upcoming movies. Thank you for staying with the story till the end. Thanks for watching.